Where do you see the boundary of being authentic for a job interview?
I don't believe in being authentic in an interview.
What?
As bold of a statement that is, I don't believe you should be authentic because you know why?
Why?
The employer is not authentic.
Welcome to NewHere, honest conversations and practical advice to help you play the game called work. I'm Eleni Mata. This week, we're talking about job interviewing, especially the first impression you make, which can last a long time. It might be your first job out of school, you might be getting your second or third job, after experiencing a layoff, switching careers, or feeling unmotivated and wanting to start over fresh. Whatever it is, your first impression is hugely important, and it takes you a long way to getting an offer. Or not. A big part of making that good first impression on a hiring manager or a future colleague is finding a connection with them right away. It's a little bit of a tightrope walk, and you can't always be totally authentic. You heard Sho Dewan's hot take on that at the top of the show. Sho is a former recruiter, and we'll have more of his advice later on. But first, all this talk about first impressions got me thinking about the nerves I always get when heading to a very particular kind of job interview, an acting audition. So I'm an actor, and I've done hundreds of auditions. Basically, you get a few minutes to show the casting director that you're the best person for that role. So I feel like actors are really good at making good first impressions because we have so much practice doing it in just a few seconds every time we audition. But it's not just about practice. There's a mindset and a method that actors have when we're auditioning. To learn more about that, I called my friend Jack.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh. Are you star 670 me right now?
Nah, we're calling from the studio, not my phone.
All right, so it's like that.
Jack is an actor and the co-founder of a theater company here in Boston. He's also one of my favorite scene partners. We talked about this briefly the other day. Like, what's interesting about actors and us auditioning for shows is that we don't have that much time to make like a good impression when we go in there.
No.
Like, we just have to have like our monologue ready. Like, that's within like a minute or minute and a half. Or you have like your 36 bar song. Like, get ready to scream your lungs out. But it's like this question of like, how do you make a good first impression when you have such little time? Have you thought about what helps you when you go into an audition?
Yeah. So I like to just walk in and be like, hi, how's everyone's day going? Like, and I'm shaking their hands. Like, I'm Jack. I mainly just want to give off that, like, at this moment, I'm not trying to like audition for you. I'm trying to work with you right now. I'm trying to understand what you want from the play and like how I can help you tell your story, not just like perform this big thing and let you know that like I can act. I'm trying to let them know that I can collaborate when we get there. I'm a good collaborator.
Yeah.
And I'm also not a terrible human being, you know? And also I feel like the auditioners, the people on the panel, are not in a good mood the majority of the time, you know, because they just saw like
50 people.
They just saw 50 people. Like, I was in this audition room. I walked in and they needed like beard flannel. And I was like, cool, great, got it. And I walk in and there was like 30 other dudes who looked just like me. And that's when you realize you're like, oh, I am just one, and you know, I'm not special.
Yeah. So how did you show that you were different from like the 20 other dudes in flannel?
Oh, I didn't. I totally failed that audition. I got totally nervous because I was focusing too much on separating myself from all the other people rather than just being who I am and giving what I can give.
Yeah.
You know, and it's easier said than done. Like, right now, I fully believe that. But right before you go into an audition, all that kind of goes out the window.
Yeah. The nerves do come in. Like, how do you shake off the nerves before going into an audition so that it doesn't affect your performance and affect the way that you, like, show yourself?
What helps is knowing your piece really well and caring about what you have to say. And also just pretending that I am not auditioning in that moment. Pretending that I am now working with the people who are on the panel. You know, that really helps. And also practicing getting rejected, you know. Luckily, I've had a lot of practice with that. And letting yourself be really upset for like a day. Hang out, watch a movie, play some video games, do what you got to do. And the next day, hopefully you have another audition.
So I think what's cool about your approach with auditioning is like you have this confidence about you already. Like you're not worried about failing. You're not worried about this person not liking you. You're just going in as yourself and not really worried about like the worst case scenario.
Oh, well, I mean, at night I worry about that. You know, like I sometimes think I'm like, oh, maybe I should just stop doing this because, you know, it's impossibly hard. So I really try not to compare myself to anyone. I think that's what hits my insecurity is like comparing people. And that's what I need to focus on a lot.
Yeah.
Is like don't compare yourself to anyone else.
And that's hard when you're like in a room with other people that are going for the same thing that you are. Like that's so hard.
Yeah. Like you're trying to like listen in to see what they're doing. And then you hear a laugh, you know, and then you're like, oh
man.
Like, they laughed. They all laughed. And now I'm next. And, you know, like,
yeah,
it's
that's,
like,
oh, man,
no. And that's the thing. You just got to focus on your own stuff, you know, and like sometimes I feel really confident and like that comes across, but sometimes you got to fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
You know,
I actually auditioned for the first time in like 3 years the other day.
What'd you do?
Clue, like the board game. Think of the board game.
Dude, that sounds so fun.
It was mad fun, but I misinterpreted the character.
What do you mean?
Like they told me ahead of time, like, oh, we want you to read for Miss Scarlet. And I was like, cool. So I did research. Like I did my research on what the role is and what the show was about and everything. And I went in with that knowledge and being like, okay, I practiced. Like I practiced the thing. I like practiced my body language, how I was going to introduce myself and everything. But because I think my mind was so stuck on how I practiced that when they gave me a different type of direction, I froze and I didn't take it well. So I ended up not getting it. That was sad,
man,
But I'm glad that I did it though, because I hadn't auditioned in so long. And I was like, this is how it feels. Jack, thank you so much for letting us talk to you about auditioning.
I feel the way I do after an audition right now. I feel nervous and like that was fun, but I'm like, you know,
did it come out well?
I hope I did a good job.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
I'll text you.
Thank you. Bye. That's actor Jack Aschenbach. He is the co-founder of Deadwood Theater Company in Boston. He made a bunch of points that I think apply to any job interview. Number 1, make time to rehearse beforehand. It really will help boost your confidence. But also make sure to stay flexible so you can be prepared for any unexpected questions. I learned that one the hard way in my last audition. Number 2, if you're feeling nervous beforehand, pretend you've already got the job and you're just here to discuss the role with your new colleagues. And number 3, in the interview, definitely highlight the skills and attributes you'll bring to the team. But there's something more subtle that you can also show the recruiter through your interactions with them. That you're good at working with people, collaborating, and listening. That's a bonus, whether you're on stage or on a laptop. After the break, we'll get a recruiter's perspective on all of this. Sho Dewan, who now has his own career coaching firm, will share his secrets for making that first impression and connection with your interviewer, whether you're online or in person. Be right back. You know when you're in an interview, facing your recruiter or potential future boss, and you wish you could just know what they're thinking, what they're looking for, and what you could say to land an offer. That's exactly why I wanted to talk to Sho Dewan. He's a former recruiter who founded his own career consulting firm. It's called WorkHap, as in work happy. He's here to help us understand how recruiters approach a job interview. He'll cover how to set yourself apart, starting with your first impression, and he has some good tips on how to handle yourself in a remote interview and in person. But first, I wanted to understand how Sho thinks about authenticity in a job interview. It's definitely something that I toy with back and forth with, like, how authentic can you be to somebody who you're meeting for the first time, especially in an interview. I mean, obviously we can't swear and we can't talk about what we do on the weekends.
Yeah.
But we still want to show our best self. So where do you see the boundary of being authentic for a job interview?
You know, I don't believe in being authentic in an interview.
What?
As generic and bold of a statement that is, I don't believe you should be authentic because you know why?
Why?
The employer is not authentic.
Ooh.
So I'm not telling you to be fake.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you to be fake. But like you said, you want to showcase your best self. I don't think your best self is authentic, right? Like the way that I'm talking with my buddies, the way that if I'm getting a happy hour or I'm getting a coffee with someone, I'm myself and I'll talk what I want to talk, and that's authentic. That's real me.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go into an interview, I'm professional me. I'm more cheerful me. I'm more confident me. I kind of step into that new persona. Interview show. New job show. That's just the nature of interviews.
There's a show with his friends and there's a show in a professional setting.
Yeah.
It's like a shift in persona.
Yep.
That's also called acting. If you
Yeah. Yeah. It's the truth.
But I don't know if you've noticed by my energy so far, but I'm an actor local here in the area.
Love it.
And we were talking about how actors have like a pretty intense interview process. And our form of an interview is auditions. If you're lucky, you have at least 2-3 minutes tops to like sing your song, 36 bars, and your monologue. You only have like a limited amount of time. And you've said something before that like the first 2-3 minutes is where you give that good first impression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, shoot, in an audition process, you really only have like the first 5-10 seconds. And the first 2 to 3 minutes in like an interview, those few minutes are crucial, you say, to make that good first impression and to establish rapport.
Yep.
So can you talk me through how you do that?
Yeah. The truth is, it actually starts when they meet you in the lobby. And they're like, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, walk with me here to get to my room. And do you need a coffee? Are you good? How was your drive in? Like the interview's already started. So that's for an in-person interview. Even for a Zoom interview, you turn the camera on. They're like, oh, hey, does everything work? Does your mic work? Are you okay? Do you need to take some notes? You know, that little prelude before the actual first question starts, that's actually the first impression. So a lot of people make that mistake of just, when they ask, yeah, how are you? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. And they walk alongside them in the lobby and say, yo, can I sit here? Okay. And it's just like very short. And then they think when they ask you, tell me about yourself, then they can turn it on. And all of a sudden they can impress them. But how you show up, even when they ask you, hey, how are you? You want to showcase your personality. You want to be a little bit different than the rest of people. So like just going back to your example, Eleni, of you in your audition and they're asking like, hey, how are you? Yeah, what are you going to be singing today? Like you could start off and say, oh, I'll be singing this song that I know from somewhere. Or you could be like, hey, everybody, yeah, it's so nice to see everybody here, man. It's a beautiful day. I had a nice drive in. I'm actually going to be singing one of my favorite songs of all time. I hope you love it too. And then you do your thing. Again, I'm not an acting career coach. Maybe that analogy is a little bit different, but I think it still applies. The first couple of seconds of how you introduce yourself, it sets you up for the rest of the interview. If you can start off on a high note and you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. I actually went to the gym at 6 a.m. I'm actually training for a marathon. And the hiring manager's like, oh, what? Oh, I just did a marathon last weekend. And then you say, oh, how'd you do? Were you impressed? And you're having that banter for 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes. You're not even talking about the work. You're winning.
So it's like Don't think of it as an interview. Think of it as like a conversation. Like you're just meeting somebody new. You just so happen to talk about your resume at the same time. It's just a conversation.
It's just a conversation. You're absolutely right.
But that's really hard to think about because you're nervous, especially if you want the job or you need the job. Have you had a client who was nervous about establishing a rapport, finding that connection with the hiring manager to like get the conversation going?
Yeah, absolutely. This is usually like new stuff for 9 out of 10 people. We were never taught the way to get a job is to build rapport and make small talk and find some commonalities. Like we're never taught that, right? So like most people go to school because they think high grades and me knowing technical skills, me having a degree from a school, like that'll get me a job. I think that's what we were most taught. So the building rapport things, it takes time. It's like trial and error. Like you'll just get better with repetition. So the people who feel nervous about those things, which everyone does, the people who feel like, oh, I don't know how to make small talk. I know this is the boring answer, but you just have to keep going out there. Maybe you don't start with the interviewer and make small talk. Next time you're ordering a Subway sandwich, try to build some rapport there. Ask them how their day is. Ask them what their favorite sandwich is. But it's these little interactions when you do in your everyday life that will actually show up in your interviews, where then you're like, oh, I'm actually not as scared or nervous to ask these questions because I've done it before so many times.
What if your hiring manager isn't biting? Like, what if you're trying to set this rapport up and they're just not? It's like, okay, well, then what? Do I just kind of leave it to be like dry and cut to the chase and that's it?
Great question. Great question. And unfortunately, the answer is kinda, yeah. Like you want to mimic their energy, right? If that's who they are, it might also be a sign that this might not be a good fit for you. Like you want to work somewhere, right? Where you have good energy or you're around people that maybe have a similar vibe. But if they're like really closed off, maybe you don't want to work there. But if you really still want that job, you gotta mimic that energy. Okay, so you tried and you can feel yourself, you could feel them kind of being a little bit more reserved. Hey, you want to mimic that.
Do you have a story from early in your career about a time that you didn't make a good first impression in an interview?
There was an interview that lasted, I think, 3-4 minutes. It was a role that I really wanted. I get on the call. She asked me, hey, how are you? Yeah, good, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm doing my thing. This is what I teach. Tell me a little about yourself. Yeah, I'm currently in HR. I do this, da, da, da. And then she asked one more question. Yeah, so what do you think is the biggest win you've had in your career? And I would probably say I did these training programs and I did this. And she's like, okay, all right, thank you. And then she hung up. And of course, I didn't get the job. I knew when the interview ended, I was like, I didn't get the job. There's probably things I probably could have done better. I probably could have tailored my answers a little bit more for the role. Maybe I could have built a little bit more rapport. I don't know about that.
Yeah, then it's not meant to be. It's like, all right, cool.
It's not.
Let me move on then.
It's very easy to you to think about like, man, I could have said something differently. Oh, I could have done this. And don't get me wrong, I was doing that too. I was beating myself up. I was like, oh man, I could have done this. I did this. But like you said, sometimes it's just not meant to be. Sometimes you're just not vibing with each other. And hey, that's okay. Something better is out there and you just got to stay a little patient.
So I'm going to go back to something you mentioned about virtual interviews, like a Zoom interview.
Yeah.
Like what's the difference in terms of approach?
The Zoom interviews is a little bit lower stakes. It's in the comfort of your home usually. You get to decide, how you look and where your background is and all those things. The biggest difference I would say between an in-person interview and a Zoom interview is in a Zoom interview, you can technically quote unquote cheat. All right. By cheating, I mean, you can have Post-it notes actually in front of you about what you want to say. You can have your copy of your resume and actually be peeking at, oh yeah, this is a good experience that I can say. You can have the job description. That? Yeah, that's totally okay. There's Zoom interviews I've had where I had the resume printed up. I would take a Sharpie and like circle, hey, this is the story that I want to tell. So like it just reminds me, right? There's also times when I would even just like write onto my computer, smile more. So I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta smile more. Look at the camera. I think that's where you kind of have an advantage of it being a Zoom interview or a phone interview. They can't technically see your peripheral, right? So like you have that advantage. You can see the things that they can't. Again, it goes back to us memorizing the script. I don't want you to have a complete laundry list of everything you want to say, but hey, maybe 2-3 bullet points right here on your screen. Have a resume pulled up. I think that's perfectly fair game.
Are you learning like how things are changing like through your clients, like when they come in and they tell you like, hey, this is how my job interview was? Because like for me, I think like it's been 3 years since I've interviewed for
Fair.
like corporate, you know?
Yeah.
The only difference that I'm seeing is AI. Like some people are doing AI interviews. So that's like the biggest change that I've seen. Like what other changes or shifts have you been noticing in the space of interviewing?
I would actually say it's similar to that. You know how people are now doing interviews where you record yourself? Like you're not even meeting someone right now. You get on Zoom, for example, and they have a question pop up at you. Like, tell me about a time you handled a difficult situation. And you hit record, and then you actually just record live on the spot, and that gets sent to the recruiter, and they see that. I've actually never had one of those recruiters personally, but it's still the same thing, right? It's a different medium. It's a different way of doing it, but the fundamental is there is someone on the other side assessing, can you do the job? Do I think I'll like you? And are you different from the other hundreds of candidates that we have? I don't think recruitment as a core will ever change. Like, that's how people are going to get jobs.
So I have one last question. What is getting you through right now?
This is completely unrelated to career advice, interview advice.
Yes.
I love my therapist.
Oh, me
yeah.
too.
I see her every Wednesday morning. It's one of my highlights of my week. I think everyone should have a mental health support or a therapist or someone in their life. And it shouldn't be someone that you are friends with. It should be someone external that you can just be like this is where you want to be authentic. That is where you want to be really authentically you and just unleash and unravel everything. Not interviews, but this.
Yeah, therapy is that.
Yeah.
I love my therapist too, yo.
Yeah.
For real. Thank you, Sho.
Thanks for having me.
Sho Dewan is the founder and CEO of WorkHap. Learn more about his career coaching at workhap.com. I really love Sho's advice to focus on making a connection with your interviewer right away, like in the first few minutes. It may feel like you're just making small talk, but this is where showing a little extra energy and personality can make a good impression. I also want to share some advice I recently got from my colleague here at HBR. His name is Ben, and he's one of our recruiters. He told me about a method for answering questions in a job interview that is so simple and so clear. It's called the STAR method. It's an acronym for situation, task, action, and result. You talk about the situation at hand, the task that you needed to do, the action that you took in order to solve that problem, and the result of that situation. And finally, if you don't get the job, that's okay. Let yourself be upset for a day and then keep going. Rejection is a big part of job hunting, like acting. Next week is our final episode of the season, and we purposely saved it for last because it's really cool. 6 months ago, Gemma Speg took the big plunge. She left her full-time consulting job to focus on making her hit podcast, The Psychology of Your 20s. We'll explore what she's learned about whether the corporate environment or entrepreneurship is right for her, and all the real fears she had around things like money, loneliness, and the uncertainty of her future. Check back next week for that conversation. Listeners, we want to hear from you. What work things are keeping you up at night? What would you like us to cover in future episodes? Please, please, please keep sending us your stories and questions about work. Our email is newhere@hbr.org. And if you liked what you heard, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a review and tell us what you think of the show. Then send the episode to your group chat, Slack, or wherever you talk work. Did you know that the Harvard Business Review has more podcasts to help you manage your business and your career? Find them at hbr.org/podcasts or search HBR wherever you listen. This episode was produced by Hannah Bates, Ann Sani, Madeline Johnson, and me, Eleni Mata. Our editor is Mary Dew, and our engineer is Tina Toby Mack. Supervising editors are Maureen Hoke and Paige Cohen. Ian Fox manages podcasts at HBR. And our theme song was composed by Graz de Oliveira. See you back here next week. Bye.